Button. All right, looks like we're live. Okay, we're back here with Jeff McLaren from Philosophy Hammer from Kingston, and we are. I have to mute something. Okay. Anyway, we're taking on Camille Paglia's Sexual Personae. We are on part 4, so we've just finished our 4th meeting, and in this one, we are going through 2 sexual personas instead of just one. We have the femme. No, sorry, we did the femme. We did the femme fatale, and this time we are doing the beautiful boy, and we're going to deal with horror at the end.
Yes.
So, Jeff, I will let you take it away.
Okay. So just to be clear, this is her perspective on a very common sexual persona. In fact, it's probably the oldest one from the art history perspective, and it is the beautiful boy. And this is a difficult subject for many people because it's quite illegal in our world, because we are literally talking about an adolescent boy past puberty, but before having the ability to grow a beard.
So this is probably her most taboo subject out of everything she talks about.
Yeah, I think so. And this particular one, she clearly says that the way it was dealt with in the past would bring the police to the door today. And there's no end of stories about how this happens with priests, with Boy Scout leaders, and it's teachers as well too. So the idea of the sexuality of children or of pubescent boys who are just into that, or even girls, is hard for people to deal with. But she quotes a guy named Bruce Benderson, who is of the opinion that children choose. They experiment, and despite the fact that we've got an arbitrary...
Who is this Bendelson guy?
I looked him up. He seems to be British, and he's a novelist and an essayist.
Is he like one of these NAMBLA guys?
I'm not familiar with those.
National Man Boy.
No,
National
I think he's older
Man
than
Boy
that.
Appreciation, or man, I don't know.
No, I think it's just a minor thing that he talks about a lot of other things. But
okay.
The point that he's suggesting is that we don't like to think about this in our culture, and I believe that Camille agrees with him, is that once you start hitting puberty, kids are actively experimenting and testing out their powers and their abilities. And we hear about this on the news quite regularly. I mean, just here in the Kingston region or in the outside, there was teachers who sent to jail for, going at it with some of their students.
Female teachers.
Female teachers, boy students, yes. But it can go the other way around. So I understand that the story with Celine Dion is that when she was a young girl, under the age, she had decided that she was going to marry her manager, and she seduced him and successfully married him, and it seemed to be a very successful marriage.
She seduced him.
Yeah,
is how she puts it,
that's my understanding. Yeah.
So I think most people today would have trouble accepting hearing something like that.
Yes, and she makes no qualms about it. She says that that's just part of our delusions, that this is not normal, and this is it's not normal in our society, but it has been normal in societies throughout art history, and it's appeared everywhere. So she talks about the first sex symbol, female sex symbol, was the bust of Nefertiti, but even before her, which she's like 1,300 years old, 1,300 before Christ, but 7,000 before Christ, they've got statues of ancient Greek beautiful boys.
And we're talking about pederasty.
Yes, so what we would call pederasty today, which is sex with somebody who has hit puberty, but is below 18 or 19, whatever the age of consent is in whatever province they live in. That arbitrary number didn't exist in the past, and so people seem to feel free. And she claims that what we would call underage children do choose and do seduce older people, and even themselves. So.
Yeah, well, they're obviously having relations with each other. Children under 18 are now, and people kind of don't really frown on that so much. It's the It's the when someone's over 18 and then and having relations with someone under 18.
Yes, and the idea is that somebody over 18 has a lot more power and more influence and
Yeah,
manipulate the child.
yeah.
And certainly that happens, and that's bad and that's wrong, and that happens at any age, and and it's probably not good at any age. But what she's claiming is that it's not always the case, and sometimes it's the children who are in charge or in control of the relationship.
Well, then maybe, but okay, to just because it's not always the case, or it might not always be the case, isn't it still a good argument to make that we're better off just spanning it all together because of the dangers how in exploitation and
I
predatory behavior?
I think she would be very much against that. We could ban sex because it could be dangerous and exploitative, uh, but it just won't work. That would be
Of course, we can.
that would
Yeah.
be a delusion that you think that we could make that work. Um, she would say that this is part of our human condition, part of our nature, and our particular society, our particular civilization has um, hidden it away, made it a taboo, made it impossible to think clearly on. And this is, it might actually be a good thing, but
So
it's not realistic. It's a delusion.
okay, so we're talking about kind of two different things here. So that the actual um, real life relationships with young with pubescent boys and and then the actual sexual personae of the beautiful boy in art. So
Yes,
how are they?
and in people today. So uh, the sexual persona is also acted on. She points this out that if a man shaves his beard, uh, he's in a sense paying a tribute to the beautiful boy persona. He's trying to look younger. Uh, that's part of the reason that we do it, and it's more and more popular the more decadent the civilization gets. She makes a comment that ancient Egypt or ancient Greek gods put a beard on Hermes and Apollo in the early stages of Greek culture, and they became less bearded and no beard in later Greek. That's the same for most of the male gods. Zeus, Poseidon, of course, are exceptions because they're the oldest gods. Um, but the idea is that this cult that we have of worship of youth and of youthful beauty, it's as old as civilization itself, and it continues to grow. Both men and women want to look youthful and young, and men can do this by shaving.
But in particular, she says that the beautiful boy is a girl boy, and that the men, I guess, the men shaving then is you're also trying to feminize yourself.
Yes, that's what civilization does. So a real man would be a caveman. He's brutal. He has no qualms about violence or lust, and will accept them at any time. Civilization pacifies men. We stylize ourselves. We become, in a sense, more feminine, with the stereotypical feminine passivity or the gentleness, that kind of stuff.
So
And beauty.
we're shaving off all the harsh edges of
Yes,
manliness. Is what
and
civilization.
one of that would be exactly, that's one of the reasons we shave. We comb our hair, we try and look attractive, and we do that more and more the more decadent the
So then,
civilization
is
gets.
looking attractive then is something you're where are we basically trying to look more feminine by looking more attractive?
Yes, in a sense, we comb our hair. Cavemen don't do that. We shave our beards. Cavemen don't do that. We tend to cut our fingernails. Cavemen don't do that. At the same time, we're also more gentle. We don't give in to natural urges to, have rape or to give into our lust or our aggression as much. And that's the whole point of civilization. It is meant to socialize us so that we can actually work together differently than if we were cavemen or in a state of nature, as Thomas Hobbes would say, or a state of war with each other, where life is nasty, short, brutish, solitary, and short. I forget. There's 5 adjectives that he attaches to that. Civilization makes our lives better, but the price is that we have to tame and conquer, or try to conquer, our baser instincts. Attraction to children or to pubescent children is part of what was always happening. I mean, in earlier civilizations, once you reached puberty, you were essentially a man or a woman, and you were able to get married and have children of your own. Life was shorter then. The chances of success of living to ripe old age were smaller. So that was part of nature. That was part of how our species needed to survive. As we become more decadent, as we become more advanced, we don't need that anymore. And so, in our society, we've criminalized it. Um, but it doesn't change the fact that as part of art and as part of our thousands of years of evolutionary biology, we are still attracted to young, youthful kids, despite the fact that we may try and hide it or not pursue it. And those who do pursue it, of course, are punished and right so by law, because that's not what our society is about. But it's still there. That's what she wants to point out. We can make all the laws we want, there will still be people who will engage in this, just like there will always be psychos out there who, no matter how much socialization happens, they just won't follow it.
So, how does Christianity and Christian morality play into this?
Well, okay, we're jumping a little bit ahead there.
Oh, sorry, I'm just looking at the bottom of the first paragraph.
Oh, okay. Okay, so yeah, so Christian morality, of course, she sees it as a delusion, a very helpful delusion for the sake of civilization, for making people, I mean, from her perspective, Christianity has advanced the world and hurt the world at the same time, but more advanced than anything else in the history of the world. So she sees it as generally a good thing. It's created a lot of art, it's made a lot of literature, it's influenced almost everything. The people who've been conquered by it, perhaps they don't feel it as much, but and they may even disagree, but from the perspective of Western culture, it's Christianity that made Western culture what it is in recent times. And it's relatively new, it's only 2,000 years old. She counts Western civilization for 4,000 years. But Christianity and its morality, which is where we're getting this notion that we should separate sex of any kind from anything except for procreation, she sees as part of a displacement of our motive power towards other things. So it was the Catholic Church and probably monks who were celibate who did a lot of the heavy lifting of saving civilization. It's one of the books that how the Irish save civilization. But the idea is that Christian ethics and morality puts new and greater taboos and burdens on people for having sex.
Which makes it kind of the ultimate delusion.
Yeah, it makes it the ultimate delusion that these aren't there. The one thing about religion is that
or that we can suppress them.
Yeah, well, civilization. The whole point of civilization is to suppress them, because if not, we would be acting like squirrels or any other mammal out there, and that's not very conducive to building the world we have in. But in order to overcome that, these sexual personae are there, and we've criminalized the beautiful boy, which existed for thousands of years prior to that. And she, although she spoke about the power of the femme fatale last time, the beautiful boy is probably the oldest one, because the art that has survived is old. It's the oldest one out there.
So let's go through some of the historical examples and images that she brings up.
Okay, yeah. So starting in the 7th century before the Christian era, there's like hundreds of examples of what she calls the Kritios boy. These are statues of young, beautiful, bodied boys.
Kritios with a K.
Yes, Kritios. Then it goes on into Rome sculptures. He points out that Augustus was a beautiful boy as well. They tend to be hairless, beardless faces. There are some paintings and pictures and crucifixes of Jesus without a beard. Saints like Saint Stephen and Saint Sebastian are considered beautiful boys. They often have sexy poses, like the David pose, where the hips and the shoulders are pointed sort of in the same direction.
Erotic poses, okay,
yeah. And she actually puts one in the book of Saint Sebastian with the arrows coming out of him in this beautiful pose. It's vaguely erotic, and he's being pierced by arrows. Um, there's a whole set of symbolism there, and this is like,
Suggestive, yeah.
yeah, and you can find this in cathedrals as far as recently as the Gothic cathedrals of Germany and stuff. So she traces this back from ancient Greece and Byzantine to Rome and Byzantium to pretty much nearly modern or Renaissance cathedrals, where stained glass windows are depicting these same boys. Um, Even today, we have statues of angels who are usually beautiful boys. They're supposed to be sexless, but they certainly look beautiful, a beautiful boy. And the classic one is the Archangel Michael beating up Satan with a spear. Clear, beautiful boy there. Then she gives some more modern examples. Before that, she points out that Shakespeare's sonnets, most of them are written for a beautiful boy, and it's directed at a beautiful boy. There's a few that are directed at women, but most of them are for a beautiful boy.
See, that seems strange to me.
Yeah.
Well, I guess if he's into boys, then he's into boys. But it also
So
seems like
again, it's not that they're into. That's a very modern notion that we are something. Like the idea of being gay is a very new concept. The actions that are involved in that are ancient and they've been around forever. But the idea of being a pedophile is a very new idea.
or a pederast.
Or a pederast, yes. For her, and for anybody, I guess, prior to like 300 years ago, they would fall into temptation of this particular act. So either be sodomy or pederasty or whatever, and they may need to be forgiven if it was not done for the benefit of creating the next generation. So that
so these acts and your sexuality previously did not essentialize someone. You didn't
precisely.
become. Yeah.
The whole concept of sexuality is a very new one. People just did things in the past, and there was no concept of actual sexuality. There was no real difference. It's a very modern discourse. It didn't exist, but the actions did. It's a way of describing it. And so if you're into that, it's not necessarily you're into that. It's like you're in a situation that makes this arousal for you. And the idea is common. Like even today, you tend to fall in love with people that you are around. You don't fall in love with people you've never seen before. It doesn't work that way. The same has always been the case. And if there's a beautiful boy around, some people fall for them, and that's why we still see this on the news whenever they get arrested for it.
But if we were in ancient Greece and someone falls for a boy, like they don't get labeled anything. That's just like, oh,
that's
like,
yeah,
it's just a thing people do.
It's a thing that people do. Yes, they didn't have labels for it. I don't think they did anyway. And even some famous people. I understand that Julius Caesar was a catamite to the king of Tyre, which meant that he was basically giving sexual services to a king when he was a boy.
Caesar, wow.
Yeah, Julius Caesar. This is the guy who conquered Gaul, right? May have even been a stage in your life. Depends on the actual culture. But some more modern examples. So after Shakespeare, she goes on to talk about Oscar Wilde, personified the beautiful boy, and his character Dorian Gray. The portrait of Dorian Gray is a beautiful boy. Lord Byron also did this, and his character Don Juan. Another one's where Billy Budd was a sailor, as a fictional character, but also Elvis Presley when he was younger personified the beautiful boy. Pretty much men shaving.
Which is funny because then he himself took on a young bride or girlfriend.
Girlfriend, yes, I understand. That's also So there's clearly an attraction to that, but it doesn't mean that. That's
didn't that other white rock star Billy Idol? No. Buddy Holly, didn't he have one? A young one too?
Seem to recall that too. Yeah, and Charlie Chaplin. But anyway. Celine Dion is the other classic example of recent times. But anyway, the point is that people find it attractive. And if you're in the right position, the right situation, she would say that everybody should be able to see beauty in adolescence. And if you can't, there's probably something wrong with you.
Right, okay. But then you could say there's a difference between being able to see and appreciate beauty in adolescence and acting on that.
Oh yeah, if you act on it now, you're in trouble.
But
It's illegal.
Paglia is trying to say that maybe it should be allowed, or we should allow for it,
Uh,
or
no,
is
she
she
doesn't
not?
go that far. She might
Okay, she does.
somewhere else.
Yeah,
In
I've
this
seen her
book,
in videos say that though.
okay, so in this book, she doesn't say one way or the other. She just says that it's probably unfair to pillar men about it. It's going to happen. You can't stop it.
Because we
So
treat it
for
like a sickness now. When
yes, in fact,
men
that's what we do treat it like a sickness. But
admit
she
that they're
says,
attracted to, well, especially prepubescent, like actual children.
yeah.
But
I mean
um,
that is yeah, it's unacceptable in our society, and that's our society. Uh, but we shouldn't be so squeamish about it and not recognize that it was very popular throughout the rest of Western culture and
yeah,
Western
that's
history.
something that we kind of have difficulty, I guess, wrestling with, since we treat. I mean, there are so many exposed predators
Hmm.
um, in this area. So like, how do you deal with the fact that this type of thing didn't used to be frowned upon years and years ago, but like we know that how traumatizing this kind of thing can be.
Yes. So when we get into horror, we're going to talk about that a little bit in the sense that horror is popping your bubbles, your particular delusions, and we set up in a delusion. It makes it worse when it gets popped. And that is part of the problem with exploitation of young people today. It is worse today when somebody is taken advantage of that way than it was in the past, for the simple reason that we're putting a huge taboo on it. Now, which doesn't mean that it's not necessarily the best. It doesn't mean that we should be doing that or that we shouldn't be doing that. It's hard to say. How much exploitation happened in the past? Probably a huge amount. Um, but when you say that something is wrong and you make it illegal, you're driving it to the fringes. And in the fringes, there is worse, or I guess more opportunity to exploit it to in a worse way. So survivors of that today, we first of all we're calling them survivors, which makes it worse than it would be. In the past, it would be, okay,
They
that was
would
just
use
a
that
stage of
language.
life. That's a very different mentality to take a look at it. And sure, we were all embarrassed. We've all been, in a sense, bullied. I'm sure, but by making it, by calling attention to it, and saying that it's wrong and how horrible it is, in spite of the fact that some might benefit from it, or actually, like that's one of the things that was available. I mean, for the benefit of kids trying to help feed their families, this might be it's a type of prostitution, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
What was
which is
better?
the kind of thing modern civilization is trying to prevent.
Yes, precisely. So we have enough food, and our society is very different from ancient Rome. So in those days, if your family was starving, this might be a viable way. Today, prostitution is still that way. It's still looked upon that way. Um, People had to get do, had to make do, and sometimes it might be better than getting killed. But if you made it into a victim narrative, you increase the pain to what we would call a victim today, uh, that may not be a victim in the past. So I don't think she goes as far as to say that it should be made legal or anything like that, but that might be. I don't even want to say that that's. No, I think our civilization is probably on the right track by making it illegal, because the conditions that we live in are very different from what happened in the past. We are we have much more abundance in the material needs of society, of people, than they did in the past. So um, yeah, it's hard to say exactly how she would react to that, but it's important to say that it wasn't necessarily a bad thing in the past, and it wasn't all bad. And even today, um, when a young girl like Celine Dion seduces her manager, who's 26 years older than her, and eventually marries, they had a successful relationship. So it's not like it's always a very bad thing. It probably is a lot worse today just because of the way our civilization is developed.
Okay, let's move on to the eye, the relationship between the eye and.
Yes. Okay. So for her, the beautiful boy is the oldest sex object out there. So the Nefertiti, and women as sex objects are relatively recent compared to young boys or young men. And it's hard to say why, but it was there. And but these cults of beauty she describes have been everywhere. And the interesting thing, it's always been homosexual men beautifying women. And we talk about we see the homosexual hairstylist or the beautician. Um, there's something about men's perversity. Okay. The way she describes it is, when you look at something, you're eliminating the rhythms of nature. You want to almost stylize it and keep it framed.
Aesthetic.
An aesthetic. And so everybody knows that a hairstyle will not last, or a hairdo won't last, but you try and you put hairspray and all that stuff.
So that's the delusion. Getting at your hairstyle is a delusion.
Yes, but it's a temporary one, and everybody sort of understands that. But the point is that you're stylizing nature and you're trying to accentuate it and make it, in a sense, better. And that has always been done by men.
By gay men.
And well, in this case, it's gay men, but architecture doesn't have to be gay men, but style, for some reason, seems to be. The point is that she's trying to say is that it's male tendency to visualize that is at stake here. And part of that is we seem to be very eye-centered. We talk about the male gaze today as being oppressive towards women. It's always been there. She's not going to say it's anything new. It may take new forms now because we have photographs and we have the internet and all that kind of stuff. So
marketing, always been capitalism.
There. Yeah, all that. But it's always been there. It's and it's a very male thing. And she goes on to say this might be very well, I'm sure feminists don't like this, but visionary idealism is a male art form. The lesbian aesthete does not exist. But if there were one, she would have learned from the perverse male mind. That it's men that do all this kind of stuff, and women partake in that and sometimes adopt it as well. And
so I personally know at least one woman that does very aesthetic art, drawings of women. I guess it's you could call it women for women, but it's very, very aesthetic, very skinny and long, and kind of the male tendency. But she is definitely not a lesbian, so maybe she's.
So again, she would have probably learned that from the perverse male mind, because men are much more visual than women, and the evidence for that is that women prefer erotic literature, whereas men prefer visual images.
Right.
There's something about us, and I think she traces it back to our gold or those hints those nudges that we talked about in the first session. So she says, if there were one, she would have learned it from the males. That's what she basically says about anything in civilization. At an earlier time, we talked about how there's no female Mozart because there's no female Jack the Ripper. Again, it's because men have to go out there and do something to show that they're men. Women can take part in that, but they don't have the three nudges that men have to do that. And so today, most men are where there's more men in power than there are women, but there's also more men incarcerated than there are women. It's an attempt at both successful and failures to do something that has led men to go into both those directions. Women can do that. They just don't have those three nudges we talked about in the first session.
Which gets into our male delusions of power that are destined to fail, and what the beautiful boy represents in relation to that.
Yes. So the beautiful boy is a hopeless attempt to try and stop death and destruction and decay. This doesn't work, but it gives us the feeling that it does. I mean, I've shaved. I haven't shaved today, but I shaved. It makes me feel a little younger. But the hair will grow back, and then I'll have to shave again. That's I'm trying to, or I guess anybody who shaves, and she says is trying to partake in the beautiful boy persona, is trying to stave off death and age, and leads to a sort of a cult of youth and beauty of young beauty, I should say, not because of beauty at every age, but um, that young beauty is a desirable one that any man who shaves is implicitly or sometimes explicitly going for. Um, and again, it's the beautiful boy that she claims is the first sex object out there. Like the objectification of men by men has been around forever, and the objectification of women came later, like about, according to her, at least based on the art history, almost 4,000 years later, from 7 to 3, or 7 to, yeah, 7, 7,000 BC to 3,000 BC.
Well, that seems backwards.
It does in today's world because we see a lot more images of women. Well,
Right.
that's not necessarily true. We see a lot more images of women. We just see a lot more images of women scantily clad, I guess.
Stylized and aesthetized.
Yes.
Um,
So, yeah, the beautiful boy is an attempt to suppress the rhythms in favor of an eye, of visual image that is static. And so she describes the beautiful boy's cruelty and indifference and remoteness and self-serene contentment. He's not acting, he's not doing anything, he's just, in a sense, standing there. That's part of the persona.
he's saying, deal with it.
Sorry?
The beautiful boy is just saying, deal with it. I'm just, or he's not even. He's just.
Yeah, the way she described it, he's in love with himself, and there's nobody else more lovable than him, so he doesn't really care.
So he doesn't care about the rest of the world looking at him or appreciating him.
Not so much, yeah. And the case of the boy, okay, so she makes a distinction between a hero who does something with deeds and has power to do these things, and a woman or a heroine who has emotional affect. The beautiful boy is neither. It's in between the two. He doesn't do anything, and he's remote and cold. That's a type of sexual persona that is also attractive because it's a sort of like a playing hard to get almost, which both men and women can both do. And in that sense, he's also a destroyer because people do admire him and do want to do things to him and for him, and he takes advantage of it. It's easy to take advantage of that. Part of that.
In the chat, we have a couple comments here. So could you say the power men hold has a higher standard deviation than the power women hold?
In sexual persona, I don't think so. I think she would say that the femme fatale is the most powerful sexual persona out there.
But maybe in civilization in general, then.
Well, men have like real political power. The beautiful boy doesn't. He is self-contained on his own. The femme fatale enjoys destroying other men, enjoys the effect she has on others. The beautiful boy, it's hard to tell. The true beautiful boy, you can't really tell. That's part of the persona.
And another one, slightly off topic. Camille, I think we talked about this before. She said, civilization is Apollonian and therefore male dominated. Doesn't she mention that kind of previous to that, society was more matriarchal?
Not matriarchal. There's no been. She does specifically say there's been no evidence of matriarchal societies.
Okay, good. That's what I thought.
It's that the fertility, the start of religion was always started off with fertility goddesses that represented the earth because they could see that. It was very close to nature. And men being afraid of women, of nature, and of death, developed an alternative, she calls high or head magic or sky cult, culminating in Christianity, where Jesus rises from the earth, which couldn't hold him, ascends into heaven to sit at the right hand of his Father, no mention of mother, and from there he will rule again. He's essentially ending a cycle, or he's setting up the end of a cycle, a goal, and leaving women and the earth behind. That's a delusional attempt to overcome nature. It doesn't work, you still die. That's where that comes from.
Okay, let's get back to the beautiful boys without motive, force. I think that's where were we?
So he's neither a hero nor heroine, but he is the
heroine.
he's a synthesis of male and female, prepubescent female. He's actually closer to a prepubescent female than he is to a male, or to a man. And there's a beauty in that. And that's for both men and for women. So one of the things that she likes to point out is that if you can't appreciate beauty, there's something wrong with you.
I agree.
She looks at, she says, if a lesbian can't appreciate the male beauty or the female beauty, there's something like she was hurt somehow, or she was traumatized, and she's maimed. She uses the word maimed. Same is true for people who we claim are gay or anything like that. If you can't see the beauty in your own gender and you're straight, there's probably something wrong with you. But the same is true within the ages. There's beauty at every age. And if you are not attracted to beauty, there's probably something wrong with you.
Well, yeah, I agree there. There's a lot of new feminist theory is kind of against the idea of beauty, or at least they try to deconstruct it and say that it's completely culturally conditioned or male dominated, and that it's just invented.
So I would think that she would say there's some truth to that. So every culture takes the raw signs of nature and stylizes them and accentuates them and ostentatiously displays them. How we do that is very different. So some African tribes like to put rings around women's necks and stretch out the necks. We like to have women that pierce their ears, sometimes their noses too, and put on makeup. So there is a part of it that is culturally determined, but it always takes the raw material that nature gives us, the unstylized, the raw natural body, and makes it better.
All right, so how is the beautiful boy a destroyer?
Again, people admire him. I think modern science talks about a beauty privilege, the privilege if you're beautiful. So people want to help be the beautiful boy, and it can ruin them. It can ruin them. So a beautiful boy can also be a vampire, and we're going to talk about vampires later. That's one of the ways, and it's very common. When you fall in love with somebody, you want to help them, in any way you can. That's one of the privileges that beauty does, and the beautiful boy can take advantage of that very easily, which is one of the reasons that he says that children can choose.
Yeah, well, that's one of the main contentious things that she has to say is that children choose.
Yes.
But the beautiful boy, is oblivious, though.
So yeah, in an ideal type. So some of the pictures that she looks at, it looks like the image gives the kid doesn't care, I think, but there's others that do. So in the picture of Dorian Gray, he cared deeply about his picture, and the last scene of it, for some reason or other, he attacks the picture and ends up killing himself. The picture reverts back. So, okay, in the story of the portrait of Dorian Gray, Dorian is blessed with a painting of himself at a young age, and he slowly discovers that the painting is aging, not him. So after like 30 years, he still looks like he's 19, but the painting looks much older. And in a fit of rage at the end of his life, he stabs the painting, but the painting doesn't get stabbed, he gets stabbed and dies. But in the previous period of that, he's so engrossed with it, like he's obsessed with his painting, to the detriment of all his friends, of his lover, of the wife that he wanted. And the story sort of shows how he hurts everybody as a result of his obsession with himself, his painting, and his youth. That's part of the destruction of the beautiful boy. Everybody around him gets hurt.
That seems pretty similar to a common trope or type of objectification we see in like movies. I say especially, or in images with women and girls. The obliviousness, the beautiful oblivious girl who doesn't really.
No, she's beautiful. That's a Justin Bieber song. I love you because you don't know you're beautiful, or something like that.
Yeah, that's a very. It's a kind of a male fantasy thing.
Yeah, the beautiful boy knows that he's beautiful. He
So
just
it's
doesn't
different.
care about anybody else
Yeah.
because they're not as lovable as he is. That's part of it.
Okay. So
The
that's
femme
the key
fatale,
difference.
yeah, the femme fatale is much more active than the beautiful boy, and hence a little bit more powerful. Um, yeah. So the last thing she says about the beautiful boy is that because we desire it, so the fact that the beards are coming back is just a blip, I think she would say. The more decadent the culture gets, the more we appreciate the feminized man. Nobody wants to date a caveman today.
But
Uh,
we the bodybuilding is really, which is good. That's kind of a new thing, and people are really into that now.
yes,
But
but also look,
bodybuilding, but shaved, and
exactly, shaved and smooth, um, because all these statues they had muscles, so you could tell they're boys that are between. They're not huge muscles. That comes a little bit later, um, and so bodybuilders, some might say, are too much. But you build to a point. You don't want to get to the point where you can't get into a door, for example. Um, like the Arnold Schwarzenegger style,
yeah.
that's an extreme, right? I mean, we have
When people like in the UK, the Canada, and the US, that's all the rage is the big, uh, the bodybuilding, the steroids,
yeah. So I
that
suspect
go along with the shaved face.
yeah, I suspect that that's like taking it to an extreme, perhaps, in the sense that some women try and look like Barbie dolls and they get cosmetic surgery and augmentation and all that. You don't have to go to that distance to be a beautiful boy. And in
Yeah,
fact, if you go to that distance, you're not a beautiful boy. It's the beautiful boy is thin.
because to me, it seems a bit of a contradiction in Paglia's notion of Apollonian and delusion, because she's talking about, as civilizations get more advanced, men and women kind of get more, what's the word I'm looking for, like blend into each other more.
Yes and no. So that's there are sexual personas that she would call androgen, where they are
Yeah,
mixing them. Uh,
because like in Europe,
that's
the men are all skinny.
yes. So that's a possible. That is one style, but it's not the only one. So there are the every style, every sexual persona also accentuates and stylizes the raw parts of nature. So uh, yes, there's that skinny aspect, but there's other things to it too. And a small, very precise beard may be part of it as well, because young boys have much thinner beards than big men, right? That's there's we're free to create it as we see fit, and the ones that are the the difference between a femme fatale and a beautiful boy will always be there, but the expressions of it will be different. So probably what will end up happening is that there'll be more um, there'll be some sort of there'll be more technologies to make you look more like a beautiful boy. So Botox would be an example, right?
Jesus.
Facial
Yeah.
hair removal, that would be another one. Um, wrinkle creams, fillers, and that kind of stuff. Uh, these are all attempts to make us look younger because that's what these sexual persona are aiming for. But what I was trying to get at was that as we become more decadent of a civilization, the caveman look will recede more and more.
Yeah, maleness is in always in retreat, is what she's saying.
Yes, and it's a fragile psychic state. Being a woman, there's no question about that. Being a man, there's a question about that. People, I mean, nobody calls women cowards. I mean, less so today for men, but in the past, if you were called a coward, that was a fighting word. You're in a duel to show that you're not, right? Um, things like that become less and less. We become more feminized in the sense that we don't need to do all those things.
Um, Shoot, I just lost what I was thinking of. Question though from the chat: the penis, the penis of beautiful boy statues was small. Were
Yes,
they meant to be
yes, very
unaroused?
small.
Yes, they were meant to be unaroused, right? They
That's
never
right.
had a care in the world,
That's right. Yes.
and that gives them some power. Is that
Yes.
they have no interest,
Yes. It's a hard to get look, or it's the, oh, I have to do something to get him. He's not interested in me kind of thing.
right? Some kind of weird defeatist chase.
And it is because the only reason you're after them is to try and defeat death, try and prevent decay and that kind of stuff.
Okay, well, do you want to give a quick, before we move on to horror, quick
Mhm.
summary of the significance of the beautiful boy in history and today?
It allowed men to act. Usually, men. It was mostly directed at men. They would have their beautiful boy with them when they went out, campaigning in the army or whatever. Um, it's not something that's happening that often today. Probably for the better. Uh, but we got to be aware of it. Can't gloss over this if we want to have any understanding of what nature is really like. Um, when our civilization falls, and she says it's when. It's a question of when, not if. Uh, we will probably revert more to a state of nature, and Beautiful Boy will probably become popular again.
Okay, I just remember what I was going to say.
Yeah.
How in her, your quote here, in late phases, maleness is always in retreat. Now, people talk about today, last 20, 30 years, especially, I'd say, that, maleness is under attack by feminists and whatever, and they're trying to turn us all into androgynous. They're trying to kill masculinity. This is a big popular talking point among fascists, um, and they use it as a weapon in a recruiting tactic. What would she?
I suspect she would agree, but not because but it's not a bad thing. I mean,
What's not a bad thing?
the feminization of men.
She would say that's fine.
Well, beautiful boys are very close to feminine. You
Right.
want long, straggly beards, no deodorant, no cologne, no cut fingernails, no. Uh, that's what we're talking about. So, if you want a real man, you're a caveman.
But
If
so,
you
so
want,
women kind of do want the caveman. They are
okay,
in a lot of ways they're attracted to the one who's gonna take her, ravage her, and maybe and be done with her, and the asshole, right? That's what the incels are all they're all upset about is that women don't go for the nice guys, the clean cut guys, the civilized guys. They go for the assholes.
so you can have an asshole that looks good and clean and all that too. Um, that would be probably a different persona, which we'll get to. There'll be okay. Next time we're going to cover a whole bunch of them. Like these two are the biggest ones that she did. We're going to cover the Amazon and a bunch of other ones that can be both male and female. Um, it's not a bad thing that men are becoming feminized. It improves beauty for one thing, because feminine beauty is a feminine kind of thing. It's rust, bruiseness, brutishness, violent cuts, and that kind of stuff. That's real masculinity, and nobody wants to have scars all over their face anymore. Um, nobody wants nobody wants to be ugly, essentially, to be well worked. A man with calluses on his hands is that attractive? Probably not so much. It might be. I don't know. Maybe I'm just hanging out with the wrong women, but um, you want the muscles. You just don't
People
want.
see it as a women would see it as a signal of this man can go out and be tough. He can handle his shit. You can put him in situations and he'll uh, yeah, I mean calluses. I mean it takes it's painful to develop calluses. Like I
Mhm.
have some just from barbells, but they're small. But the first few weeks are gonna suck if you start lifting weights and hitting dumbbells and barbells. It's kind of like it's a signal, like many things are.
Mhm.
Status,
Yes.
status, and how you can personality. I guess you would say.
Yeah, and that's a part of it. So there will be other male personas out there that are helpful, but um, what incels are talking about is just the lack of creativity on their part to develop one.
That's that's a good point. It's a lack of creativity and defeatist attitude. Okay, let's move on to horror.
Okay, yeah, horror. So within the horror, we're also going to look at the vampire. Um, the horror genre, I guess, for her started with a horror novel, and she views it as okay. Well, this is probably what everybody agrees with. Part of what happens in a horror movie is that you get shocked, you get scared, and fear is similar to sex in the sense that your heart starts beating, you're nervous, you're worried. if you can imagine your very first time having sex, you were probably quite fearful. There's that connection. And the shared fright, the shared horror, is a sexual transaction. Not completely the same as real sex, but it has that aspect. So she refers to it as a latent eroticism. Um, so she makes a big use of Freud having used the word shuddering and the connection between shuddering of fear and shuddering of pleasure. They're there. But the thrill of terror, she says, is feminine. It's passive. It's masochistic. You're just sitting there and you're accepting it, which is sort of it's a feminine aspect. So while men have the impetus to go out and do something, women are reminded that they're women every day. They don't have to do anything to do it. That's the passiveness that is associated.
So that's why men aren't supposed to freeze in terror if something scary happens, or they're
Yeah.
looked down on,
Yes.
or emasculated.
Yes, precisely. So yeah, if you freeze in a war zone, you're considered as subhuman or subman. Um, it's actually just human, but the the horror, as she sees it, is the popping of your delusions. So the first on the first level, the idea that you have a chance in a horror movie is a delusion that needs to be popped. So she brings in the vampire and horror films. She looks at there's some that are done well and some that are most of them are done very poorly. So the splattering kind, where you see lots of blood and gore and all that kind of stuff, it's not the point. It's very rarely the point. In the case of vampirism, she talks about it's domination and submission. It's sex. That's the point. It's not the blood and the destruction and the begging and all that stuff. That's part of it, but it's done usually poorly because you see a lot of blood. A vampire for her, well, let's see how she puts it. It's a vampire sucks the life force out of a loving, willing is very important, victim. And this is where it connects to love. When you fall in love, deeply in love with somebody, and you're willing to do anything and everything for them, you are a willing victim. If you're willing to give up your career, your life, and everything for them because you love them, like this is true love. It's pathetic from the outside when you see your child or your friend turned into a drooling puppy to somebody. You think of them pathetic, you laugh at them at the same time. But when you're going through it, when you're in love with somebody like that, it's the best feeling in the world, and you're willing to do that. That's dangerous for society because you're giving up all your obligations and your duties for this loved one.
Yeah.
Yeah, society frowns on that. But that's true love. And when the vampire takes that, there's the horror. Say you're a parent and you're looking at your daughter, your son, who's fallen in love with somebody so deeply that they're willing to give up everything, their future, and let's say they're not exactly the best person from your parents' perspective. There's horror for your parents there. Oh my God, what have they gotten into? And good parents will try and break them away from that. But if it's true love, like if it's a deep love, they will fail because the vampire has them in their clutches, you could say, and your parents have no hope.
Yeah, no talking sense into your daughter there.
Exactly. If they could talk sense into it, then it wasn't true love. That's the whole point. And that's the horror of it. And sometimes it works out well, sometimes it doesn't. So recognizing the growing realization that you have no chance against the vampire, that's the horror of it. So if in the movie it looks like the protagonist has a chance, that's bad horror. Really, they have a chance? No, you're supposed to realize that you don't. And she makes an interesting thing. It's like if she compares. She has this notion of high Gothic where the vampire is world weary. They know it all. They're so far ahead of everybody. It's just like they're going through the motions to feed, in a sense. But because they're so experienced and so powerful, you got no chance. That's the whole point. So, what was I going with this? The modern horror that shows the vampire going into a frenzy when they see blood and
Mm.
crawling on all fours.
Yeah, losing
That's the
control.
point. Yeah, losing control. No, they don't lose
That's not a
control.
vampire.
That's that's not a vampire. The vampire has complete control, and you can't change that. But you think you can, and then that is popped.
And so there's a thrill in that submission and that
Yes.
loss of control. Is she saying that's particularly appealing to women?
Well, not necessarily appealing. It's appealing to both, but
But
women
it's women who
feel
read
it.
the graphic novels and the gothic novels. She's
Yes,
saying.
it's more feminine because that's how women are. They go through. They have a cycle that keeps coming back, and there's nothing they can do about it. It's sort of like a ticking clock. Men don't have that. Men are goal oriented, directed on. They're trying to they're trying to establish themselves as men, differentiating themselves from everybody else. That that psychological dynamic is what makes this much more feminine.
So it sounds then that like most of these classic gothic vampire stories are really just simulating kind of the rape fantasy,
Uh,
but in a different way, in a horror way.
in a horror way. So the horror again is not necessarily always of the victim. It's but what's happening to the victim. So again, if you're a parent and you see your daughter going off with somebody truly in love and you can't control him anymore, that's a horrible feeling because you know that this guy's maybe not good for her. There's the horror, and we're the ones watching it. So we're supposed to empathize with the victim and then see them fall in love with this person or the vampire take control of them, and we fear for them. There's a horror there. Uh,
But there's also horror on the victim's side. Well, sort of.
there
Like they're
should be.
enjoying it.
They're enjoying it. That's part of what. That's how the connection to vampirism and love is. If you're in love with the vampire, you don't see it as exploitation. You want to give it willingly. I mean, the vampire doesn't even have to ask for it. If you're aware of what's going on, you want to give everything to the vampire. You want to make him happy. And that's part of your happiness, and that's deep love. I mean, you don't even want to live if you don't want to have them. Right? Romeo and Juliet, when they were willing to, they'd rather die than live without each other. They were in love, and if one of those happened to be a vampire, there's a problem. It's going to end in death. Um, Hopefully, a long-term death, like a natural death. But if not, it could be a premature death. That's when it's bad. So what she's saying is, the vampire acting like a bloody animal. That's
Not real.
enjoying it. It's the vampire is going to win, and you come to that realization that you're powerless against them. That's the horror, on one level. Um, there's a second level to it, to horror. It, so the connection is the bursting of bubbles. Um, for her, Christianity is incomplete. It's goal directed. It's aiming for an end. It's trying to overcome nature again. So that's part of the attraction to nature of Christianity is that Jesus is going to come back and he's going to overcome nature, all the evil and bad in the world, and his kingdom will have no end. It's very appealing. It built civilization, built Western civilization after it started, and has done a lot of good and bad things, but it has certainly built civilization. To have that illusion popped is a horrifying thought. So I've been doing all of this good work in the hopes of getting to heaven. There's no heaven? Oh my God, that's dangerous. Or what about undead people? That doesn't fit in with the Christian mentality. But is it there? Is it? That's the horror. That's part of the horror. So if you can imagine, you've put your entire life into a religion, and then all the things that don't quite make sense are brought out or hinted at. That's the horrible. And in the case of Christianity, the big thing is that we can overcome nature. That's the biggest delusion. We can overcome death. Big delusion.
So the
And
vampires or horror is popping that bubble,
yes.
that
And
delusion.
yes. So whatever your sacred cows are, true horror for you would tempt you to see that that's a delusion. So
So okay, so and that goes for any religion, right?
yes,
Or any culture.
including atheism and veganism and that kind of stuff. So
So yeah, so there could be to us some other cultures might have some very kind of like what we might think is funny or silly horror movies,
Yes.
and vice versa.
Yes.
Like the things that we find horror could
The
be.
horror is at its, I guess, at its most abstract. Horror is the popping of firmly held delusions, and we have lots of them. Our civilization is built on. The more civilized you are, the more delusions you have. So the horror genre, pops those, or makes you realize that whoa, something, this isn't quite right. So the vampire, it's got eternal life, right? As long as it just keeps feeding. That's a horrifying thing if you believe in God and that He's going to bring you eternal life. Is there another way? Am I doing this the wrong way? On one level. On the other thing is that you have no chance. The whole delusion of civilization is that you can beat back nature, and while it's true that you can do it for a short period of time, nature will kill you. You die. Everybody dies. Um,
That's somebody in chat just brought up a good point.
yeah.
You know the term Netflix and chill.
No.
So that's what like that's someone a guy or text a girl or vice versa and say, hey, next Netflix and chill question mark, meaning you invite you stay in the other person's dormitory room for Netflix and chill, meaning you're just gonna hang out in that person's bed, you're gonna watch a horror movie, and you're gonna get it on.
Right. Okay.
So she's got it's kind of it's a Paglia has predicted almost the future with this marriage of um, sex, domination, submission, the shuddering, and horror.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The yeah. Horror. Yeah. So she spends a lot of horror on Christianity because Christianity is the foundation of our civilization, our present civilization. It wasn't clearly before Christianity, but today it is. So um, any Protestant or Christian who even contemplates the possibility of a vampire, like a real, like, Dracula kind of vampire, is having their faith tested in a very minute way, because vampires shouldn't exist in the Christian realm. But they exist in a metaphorical sense, because anybody who takes advantage of you is a vampire. And then you can apply vampire to any one of these sexual personas.
Like your landlord.
Yes, like a landlord. That would be, I think, Adam Smith. But any case, the horror is the popping of bubbles. And okay, let's take another one that's less associated with Christianity: zombies. A zombie is metaphorically a career person who's dedicated to one thing only. In the case of the zombies, getting brains, or biting people, or whatever it is.
Well, that's the modern interpretation. They started out kind of representing slaves, and
and their uprising, yes. Yeah. So, but yeah, in today's thing, it's less to do with Christianity or slavery than job slavery, I guess you might want to say.
Right. Late capitalism.
The possibility that you might become one is the horror. The fact that you are, and you can't, nobody wants to get rid of, everybody needs a job in a sense, is the horror of it. And it's in the subconscious. So I suspect that she would say that The Walking Dead is a pretty bad horror, because the overwhelming power of industrialized capitalism to make us want to pursue self-exploitation and exploitation from others in order to get the things that capitalism wants us to sell is overwhelming, even for the people who, unless you're willing to go out and live in the bush by yourself, you're a zombie in our world today. And
consumer society, makes you too.
Unless you realize that, the Walking Dead, they keep winning. They keep surviving. Doesn't happen that way.
Yeah, so that's not a good horror.
Yeah. I would suspect. As far as I know, she's never talked about The Walking Dead, but I suspect, based on what she said about vampires and high gothic, they don't quite got it right, but they might have something else right, because it seems to be quite popular.
Does that bleed into her notion of the sublime?
Okay, yes, right. So the sublime, that's what's missing in Christianity. The the smallness, the cyclical thing. So again, Christianity is directed towards an end, the second coming, life afterlife. It's continually popped by nature. This delusion is continually popped because everybody dies. We keep rebirth. We keep dying and having children, and we born again. This not born again in the Christian sense, but new generation is born again. And yet, the fact, all the evidence out there suggests that it's a delusion, but we keep on believing it, and it keeps needing to be popped, but we don't see the popping of it. So if we bring it face to face with that, we're sort of popping the delusion. But the delusion, the thing that Christianity is missing, that most horror is missing, is that the fecundity of the rebirth, the cyclical thing. And insofar as it's missing that, it continues to be a delusion. So coming face to face with the smallness of man, of a man, because it's usually man, in nature, compared to the vast powers of nature, that is a horrifying thing. I remember one episode, or one scene in the Titanic where the camera moves way far away, and you see how small the Titanic is in this really dark ocean. That was supposed to be a horrifying theme, because it realizes, hey, when you're in the Titanic, it's big, it's huge, and all that, but really,
It's still significant.
It's small. And then you see the size of the iceberg compared to the Titanic. It's small. The Titanic is small. That's the horrifying thing. Nature is huge and powerful compared to everything that we have.
Now, does that okay? So the notion, the Christian notion, or or the ancient notion that the Earth was at the center of the universe, and the discovery thereafter that no, in fact, we're just the tiniest speck in a
That was a
billionth of a
horrifying
billion.
thing for many people, yes.
Yeah.
And it's also horrifying for many people to think that the Earth might be more than 7,000 years old.
Right. I mean, it kind of, I mean, that's an obvious one, because as soon as you know how big the universe is and how old it's been, then you think, well, why, if there's a God and he's got all these rules for us, why would he wait around 8 billion years for us to evolve and become what we are? And then, there's no chance that we're going to survive till the end. Why would he create this like universe that's going to live and die in insignificance? And it kind of throws everything they believe into question.
But remember, horror can also be for any one of our delusions. So if you happen to be an atheist, it might be horrible to think that, hey, you might be wrong, there might be a God out there. So Pascal's wager says you should probably do this just on the balance of probabilities.
If the sky opened up one day and Jesus came floating down, all the atheists, we wouldn't
it's a horrible thought for an atheist. Yeah. Whoops, I chose the wrong side.
Well, or a Muslim or a Buddhist, they said, shit, we picked the wrong team.
Yeah, that could probably be a type of horror for somebody else too. But it's really a challenging to the delusions that you deeply hold, which everybody has in civilization. So there's going to be no end to horror. There'll be no end to the possibility and topics of horror. And if it's done really well, she's going to say the sublimity of nature needs to be thrown in there to overcome the delusions that we have, that we think we can overcome nature, because that's pretty much what all religions do.
So she likes old Gothic horror, vampire movies. Does she have any other examples of horror that she likes?
Yes.
Does it well?
Yeah. Okay. So, according to her, The Daughters of Darkness, a 1971 movie, is a very good example of it. Now, I happened to watch this, and it's a tiny little bit. Okay, it looks old, just to be fair, but the dialogue in it is interesting. The chief vampire doesn't really have any major powers except the power of seduction through her words, and it seems to have an exaggerated effect on the character. So it's two lesbian vampires who want to seduce, who want to feast on a couple, a newlywed, eloping couple. And as it turns out throughout the story, the younger vampire is accidentally killed. Apparently they have a fear of running water or something like that, and she accidentally impales herself and dies. The older vampire, no big deal. He's already in the process of seducing the woman,
Which
and
is their real target.
which is the real target. The man, she wants to keep around because they're both going to feed on him, and she's successful. They had no chance, um, which is the pretty cool thing. And the last scene is the new young lady doing exactly what the older vampire had done to a new couple at a different resort somewhere else. So uh, the horror is that it's going to continue, and there's no end to it in that sense. Um,
So
there's
good horror is a horror movie or show where the horror doesn't end. It overcomes.
it wins, yeah. The horror wins.
Even if there's small victories, I guess, for the protagonists. That
Yeah,
horror
that
does.
was that was the interesting thing. She was the protagonists were fighting against the, the, um, the sense of being controlled or seduced by this person, this vampire. But she was almost amused by their attacks, and she just pulled them right back. Just pulled them right back. It was like they had no chance. So in that sense, that's why it was really done really well. The second one that she said was a 1983 movie, The Hunger, which she says comes very close, and the only thing that ruined it was the vampire apparently did go into a frenzy. A vampire that goes into a frenzy loses control and just like starts sucking blood. Um, is not a vampire. They're in complete control. They never lose control. Um, if they lose control, they're not a vampire. They've screwed it up. So that she saw was the only weakness of it. The rest was apparently quite brilliant. Um, yeah, and she liked The Turn of the Screw as a movie. In Yeats' poem Lita and the Swan,
Hmm.
it's also a good one. Um,
I'm surprised she didn't like Alien, the original, because that bursts a lot of bubbles. I mean, body horror, all kinds of things. And I mean, Ripley wins in the end, but like the alien kills the whole crew,
mhm.
one by one. Um, yeah, yeah.
I don't know. Did you hear about her say something about aliens? It's not in the
No,
book as
but
far as I know.
I feel like it should count as a good one,
Mm.
even though the good guy wins. Which
I suspect, from what I see, the overpowering power of this alien, its ability to survive in space and in all these other things, would be very good. I think the only thing that she would say is
true.
that Ripley survived. Ripley has no business surviving in a horror movie like that.
Yeah.
And then the alien has to come back. So they find that shuttle. Instead of finding Ripley in it, they should find the alien, and it takes over the next ship, and then expands that way. Because then you have a whole set of new characters, and the alien wins it every time. Uh, yeah,
Well, actually, did you see the third movie?
that's when the U.S. Army, or sorry, the Army takes over, and they have it in the in that starship in the middle of nowhere, or something like that.
uh, no, the army comes down in the second one.
No, no,
The
that's the
third
second.
one's
Sorry, the fourth one. That's the fourth one.
no, the fourth one's is on a ship, and yeah, I guess maybe there's army that
That's
come
where
in.
she's got half the DNA of an alien or something like that, right? The
Yes,
fourth one was
yes.
the horrible one. That was, or sorry, the third one was the horrible one. That's the one where they
I
had
no,
the.
I thought the third one was actually pretty good. Well, when they released the director's cut, um, because that's I mean the main characters from the second movie, except for Ripley, had actually died, and in the end, the Queen Alien actually gets Ripley. Like they have to kill each other because,
Oh
or she
right,
has
but
to
they had
kill.
that baby there. They were looking for the aliens were eating the human reproductive system or something like that, right?
Human reproductive system.
Didn't they?
Your memory is a little.
Okay, wasn't there one alien where they had a new hybrid alien where that
Yeah,
little.
yeah, that was the fourth. That was Resurrection.
Oh, that was Resurrection. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, yeah. The third is where they're on a prison planet. The alien takes them all out, but Ripley's impregnated with a queen, and because
They
of
all
that,
died. Yeah, she falls into like
she
a
has to kill
of
herself. So in it, the alien kind of wins in that way, in that
yes,
she's taken out all the main characters.
yes. Okay,
Anyway,
that's
we're
sense.
getting off
Yes,
topic. We're talking about alien. Okay. Well, we've gone through everything. You want to give a summary again of just a horror
yeah.
and why it's relevant?
So, in the case of the vampire, they are real people are out there who are vampires, not in the Twilight sense or in the Dracula sense, in the sense of draining your life force. Um, and it's based on love. Love is the motive for submitting to the vampire, and it's done willingly. That's the horror of it, because any one of us who's ever felt love where you're willing to give up somebody. Imagine an unrequited love. You're willing to do anything for this person, they don't take advantage of you. It's hurtful. It hurts.
That they don't take advantage of you?
Yeah, if you're in love, right? But if you're on the outside, you're looking at it, it's like, you're so pathetic. Can't you get over it? Like, grow up, man. That kind of
Yes.
stuff. Right? That dichotomy is a bit of the horror there. From a personal level. On the higher level is the popping of the bubbles of your delusional bubbles. So those two levels, when they're properly in sync, you get good horror, and good horror has this element of the sublime, which not only does it pop your bubbles, it shows you the limitedness of yourself compared to the true powers in the world, which is nature.
Which is nature, right? Which is what she's getting at in the book,
Yeah.
more broadly. All right. Well, that's good. We've covered everything now. So next, what do we have next week?
So we're going to
not next week, but next session.
Yeah, next session we're going to touch on alchemy. So alchemy, he's got a pretty interesting take on alchemy, but we're also going to go much faster through the personas. These two were the biggest ones. We're going to start off with the Amazon persona. Spend maybe a quarter of the time on the Amazon. Then we're going to do. I'm doing this here. Then we're going to do the androgen of manners, the android, or the manufactured object, the court hermaphrodite, the dandy, and the decadent aesthete.
That's great. I don't know what any of those are, so I'm excited.
Yes, they're all around us too. Or most of them are anyway.
All right, Jeff.
Yeah, so we'll do that in about 2 weeks.
All right. Well, thanks for coming back on stream.
My pleasure.
You can share this that link with whoever you want. I might put it up on Reddit. But see you next time.
All the best.